Hello and welcome to the Raptors Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Samson Folk, and today a very nice episode. As you know, we're starting this podcast late because we were just having such a good time visiting with each other, catching up. Vivek Jacob, dear friend of mine, he does the Raptors over at Raptors.com, soccer, tennis at CBC, Complex, Sportsnet. He's everywhere talking about every sport because he's the guy who knows a lot of things. But today we're going to focus mostly on the Raptors. He was there for Kyle's return. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about PascAll-NBA, which we've both written about and dove into. And we're just going to talk hoops. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, my dear friend Samson. It was great to catch up before we started this. And yeah, I think, you look back on what that night was against the Miami Heat and Kyle Lowry. It was kind of like a full circle moment for myself too. Just thinking back to, where I was when he joined the team. And then, all those games that I've watched with my brother who was also in the arena. And so to be part of media now and be in that press room pre-game, post-game, and be part of it as a professional as opposed to when he started out. It's pretty cool to look back on all of it.
What was the daily function of a Raptors game before you were doing the media shtick?
It was meeting up through the university days. It was definitely just like meeting up with friends at a bar. A lot of games watched at Cooper's Pub in Mississauga because they used to have, I believe it was a 25-cent a wing deal on game nights. And so obviously being cheap university students, we're just going to eat wings every other day. And that was the university experience. And then, you go over, you start working and you're still meeting up when you can, watching games at home, watching games with my brother. All throughout, right from the time I've come here, it's mostly been watching with my brother. So we have a lot of shared experiences when it comes to this team. And and then at a certain point, it was like, okay, I'm going to start a blog. And that's when you kind of get more serious about it. And here we are now.
If you had asked, a guy like Doug Smith or one of the people who represent the old guard of Raptors media, if starting a blog had been what kind of started them, got them on the road to actually being in-house covering the Raptors, would just blow their mind. So it's so interesting to hear that, Blake, I don't think started his own blog, but started writing for Raptors Republic. So many people just started writing for Raptors Republic, but the formation of this website is just dudes blogging. Dudes rock a Jace behavior. Although, okay, let's skim over this though, because nobody cares. So you're in the arena. Kyle Lowry's there as well. He strides into the room that I know you were in, unbuttons the jacket, and says, "Damn, it's hard to look this good." So what are you feeling? What's the ambiance? How's it feel?
Yeah, and Alvin Williams was there too as a member of media. Again, you talk about things changing over time. Alvin Williams, he's looking over and he's like, Kyle is saying, "Hey, I definitely look better than you." He looks over at Alvin and says, "I've definitely seen that suit before." And Alvin retorts back with, "Yes, you have." And so obviously Kyle was decked out, had the championship ring on. And you could just see someone who was ready to soak it all in and show his appreciation for the city, the country, the team, from top to bottom, right? Like he talked about everyone from Masai to Bobby to the players who are ushering in this new era of Raptors basketball, Scottie Barnes. So it's just a very wholesome pre-game presser.
So you're somebody who you've worked these practices, these games prior to Kyle leaving, but you were also there for some of Kyle's most curmudgeon adjacent behavior, because Kyle was known as a guy who was a bit like, I don't know, what the exact term is, something with media where it's kind of like a game of cat and mouse. Like he has a
Yes.
contempt for media because of how it treated him in the past, the same way that, some players do, and deservedly so. And was this, was he still carrying around that contempt except more playful, or was this an embrace of everybody in Toronto, including the media?
No, I would say this was an embrace of everyone. And I think, especially, with how thoughtful he was with his answers, playful, genuine. Usually Kyle is the type that if you give him a window to give a yes, no answer, he will absolutely just say yes or no. And in some ways he's just challenging you too, right? It's like, hey, you gave me an out and I'm going to take it. But there were questions that, that he very easily could have just, given a very short answer, but he didn't. And so I think that thoughtfulness, that appreciation, and I think, when he looks back on the 9 years, that maybe there were moments where early on in his career he was being covered unfairly, but maybe now he looks back over the 9 and says, yeah, it was largely positive. And obviously winning a championship will do a lot to change that. But I think the appreciation for everyone is probably what stands out most to me.
That was kind of, hearing colleagues in the media talk about it, reading about it over the years, and seeing it happen, and just taking context clues. That was kind of my takeaway, is that Kyle is very situationally aware, and that there's a bunch of different things you can point to over the years that make this case, but it made sense to me that he was like, it's Kyle Lowry Day in Toronto. Like, this is as much a day for me as it is the people who want to celebrate, what I've done here, and everybody gets a piece. So, like, the veil of, scrutiny against anybody who it might be there is dropped. Let's sit down together and let's, like, have a nice time. That seemed like something I expected to happen, although I wasn't there. But I'm glad it happened for everybody in the room. And he'll obviously remember it for a long time. But what's the situation for you? Was it an important night?
Yeah, it was a really important night. And one quick thing I'll also add is I think we've seen this Kyle Lowry ever since the championship. I think part of why that 2019-20 season was so special was because you saw those games where he'd just go off and he's playing on the road and he's showing off that imaginary ring on his finger after a big shot. And moments like that, it just showed that the weight was off his shoulders, right? He had gotten the respect that he knew he deserved, that a lot of people in this city knew he deserved, but maybe he didn't get, across the United States and wherever else in US media. And so I think we've seen that version of Kyle since the championship. And for me, I think just having that appreciation for Kyle Lowry, to see what that would look like. And, I had to do radio pregame with Sportsnet. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to find a quiet spot on this night. But I found the quietest spot that I could find, and I did it. And then as soon as you went into the arena, they introduce the Raptors came onto the court first, and obviously everyone's cheering. And then as soon as the Miami Heat come out, the crowd is going nuts. They're cheering, Kyle laying the ball up in pregame warmups, and you get to that tribute video and you see all the moments, and you see, you see his body transition as well from what it was his first couple of years with the team to what he became and was affectionately called Skinny Kyle. The appreciation from the crowd, that standing ovation that he got, for him to be there with his kids too. Again, you talk about the growth of Kyle Lowry into a man from where he was when he first joined the team. Those kids, seeing them growing up that's been part of it too. And so for them to be with him at center court, it made for an incredible moment. And then you have Fred and Kyle going back and forth, going at each other, just like they would in practice. All of that just added so much to the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is interesting to think about it through the lens of the past, like to have his kids there when the Raptors themselves for like a couple of years labeled themselves as like the team of fathers. And that's why they had so much success, is that becoming dads put their lives into perspective and made them, fine tune their approach to basketball. And, maybe they were just like gassing up the media so they got to write better stories. But these are things they talked about. And it's cool to see somebody who centered being a father as so much of his life get to celebrate, one of the biggest moments of it with his kids. So yeah. And yeah, the dueling mini point guards was probably the most exciting part of the first half. And then I guess we could talk about the game a little bit. Kyle won and the Heat won. And it was largely, per my view, because of the dribble penetration of Tyler Hero and Kyle Lowry. Kyle's uncanny ability to reset and rearrange driving and passing lanes that the teams think they have them covered. And then Kyle switches a lane himself and starts backtracking up the court in a half court possession and then swings the ball to a guy who nobody even thought that they needed to defend. And the Heat hit, I think, 12 threes, 12 of 18 in the second half, and the Raptors lose. What are your flashbulb moments from the actual gameplay?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And you think about those moments where the Raptors look to trap, and it's not so many times that they were able to trap necessarily in the middle of the floor. And that's where Kyle is wise enough to say, hey, how far can I drag them out before making the pass, and making whoever's helping have to scramble that much more. And that's when you see that extra pass lead to the open man. The Raptors probably could have had their defensive coverages better aligned, but those are the little things where, in terms of gravity as a ball handler, where you can make the defense shift one way to where that recovery becomes that much more challenging. I think that's probably the thing that stands out to me. And that's just Kyle, game within the game, knowing what the Raptors are going to try to do, and how he can best manipulate that.
I'll say three. So we'll do this. So I'll name a couple favorite things I had from the game last night, and I'll make sure I don't steal all of them, and then you can name some too. Or actually you go first. Some favorite plays, let's say, and then I'll see if you take all of them, then we'll see where I stand with picking some. But your favorite plays from last night?
So one I will definitely take is Fred driving into the paint and Kyle Lowry vertically contesting, but Fred making the shot anyway, and then having that wry smile for him and sort of join back and forth and saying, hey, I got you there.
The contrast of Fred's like calm, like just good friend smile, like, yeah, I got you, with Scottie flexing and screaming at the top of his lungs next to him is so funny, and such a like a great encapsulation of the Raptors, like this steady Freddy thing. And then just this, at times, I don't want to be offensive to Scottie, but like batshit rookie, because Scottie is like Scottie attempts to do things that, many players won't attempt to do on the floor, and he expresses himself in a unique way as well. The collection of Pascal Syakum Euro steps to try like hell to avoid Kyle Lowry's looming charge. And he made two of them. One was towards the end of the game. It was an end one. The other one wasn't an end one, but Pascal is basically 45 degrees. He is leaned, ass over tea kettle, and just pushing basically with his elbow adjacent to the floor. He's getting low. He's trying to get around Kyle and making these shots. And I tweeted this out, but I felt like that was a window into years and years of practices. Like there's no way they haven't been doing this.
Oh, no question. I mean, watching those plays, I mean, I'm sure Pascal, like, coming into the game is like, hey, I know he's going to be there. I am going to go around him. He is not going to draw the charge on me. That is absolutely not happening tonight. And, Kyle is on the other end of the spectrum where he's saying, hey, I'm going to get Pascal, not once, not twice. He's probably thinking about that. And so to see it play out the way it did was awesome. The other one I'll throw in there is another scouting report play. It's Chris Boucher going hell for leather at Kyle. Kyle just taking him out, sidestep, knocks down the three. Just as soon as you saw Chris Boucher rushing out, you knew what was going to happen. And of course it did happen.
Yep. There were some like quintessential Kyle Lowry plays that were like, well, it's actually, this one is kind of like a variation of Chris Paul play, but you just hit the brakes in your own backcourt, and he almost got Pascal with it, but Pascal jumped out of the way. The camera kind of cut away from it. It was switching angles from on player to the regular courtside one, or bird's eye view one. But, you still could see it, and he ended up getting Pascal to pile all over him in jail later on in the game too, which was classic Lowry, because of course.
Yeah. No. And you wanted to see all of it, right? I think there were some people that were watching and like, who are obviously diehard Raptors fans and saying, oh man, this is really annoying. But from my side, it was like you wanted to see those things and see, this Raptors team, at least the core pieces that should know about it better than anyone, how they would deal with it. And so I did think they, big picture, I did think they dealt with all the emotion of the night pretty well, because, I know it's a long time to go back, but that home opener, obviously the first game at Scotiabank Arena in 600 days, they didn't handle that one very well. And so to come out and throw the first punch and play a really good first half, I think that was, if you wanted to look at two goalposts and how they've shifted, I think that was a good sign.
Yeah, they put an F word on the broadcast, because they went into you wouldn't have seen this because you're at the game, but on the broadcast, the camera went into the Raptors pregame huddle, and you got the tail end of Fred saying, "We don't care about anything that's happening over there. Like, leave it now." He said, "Let's go get an effing win." But it came through so crystal clear on the broadcast. I was like, "Ooh," obviously I don't care, but it's like, oh, some people will care about that, which I thought was funny. But yeah, they definitely steeled their minds and prepared them for this one.
Yeah, and that's nice to see. I mean, the theme of this season has been to see the growth of so many of these players within their own individual realm get to a place that has this team looking pretty good heading into the postseason.
And so let's do growth and looking pretty good, and the intersection of those things for the Raptors seems like Pascal Syakum. You and I both wrote pieces, you for Raptors.com, me for Raptors Republic, and both will be linked, by the way, listener. So just go to the article, or just go to Vivek's Twitter page, whichever you prefer. You can go to the article or Vivek's Twitter page. I don't care. But I'll tell you this much: we both wrote about it, and I think now, I talked about this with Sean Woodley on a separate podcast, but if they're moving around the forwards, the guards, and centers, I don't really think Pascal has a very strong case. It's really tough to catch up to guys. But if they're sticking to the forwards thing, and voters kind of recognize the way that it's gone before, then Pascal, I think, has almost an ironclad case. And so operating under the assumption of, hey, votes are going to look similar to years past, what is the case you make for Pascal?
I think first off, votes looking similar to years past is going to play out because I saw that the way the voting is going to work is your the position in which you garner the most votes is the position in which you will be applied to the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be very difficult for voters, as much as they might want Jokic and Embiid to be on the first team, to actually have it pan out, unless they go to an extreme level of colluding to make sure that happens. And obviously, I don't see that being the case, seeing how they have pretty busy jobs. So I do think we're going to end up, with Jokic and Embiid, one on the first team, the other on the second team, because they probably won't get, the most votes at the forward spot. And so they'll both be centers. I've seen some stuff about Luka Doncic maybe going in, getting votes as a forward, but I doubt that'll happen as well. I think for all intents and purposes, he is a guard. And the DeMar DeRozan one is probably the most interesting.
Yeah.
Because I know that he was listed as a guard for the All-Star game, but I don't think people view him that way. And so I think that's one where he could potentially get more votes as a forward than a guard. So that's potentially something that would impact Syakum. But beyond that, a lot towards the end of my piece, I kind of made the case for why Pascal Syakum has had a better season than Jimmy Butler. And so that's where I looked at what Pascal has been at for pretty much December. And he's been, in my eyes, growing into an elite playmaker. His scoring has been extremely good since the All-Star break. It's been very good before that. And then I touched on things like the spacing on offer for him versus the spacing on offer for Jimmy Butler with the Miami Heat. And one thing that I found interesting as I was looking at those two players was the mid-range game, and the fact that Pascal Syakum has had a better mid-range game on offer this season than Jimmy Butler was another thing that stood out to me, because they're both very good around the basket.
Mm-hmm. Well, it brings to the idea of what your team necessitates of you and how you succeed in roles that aren't your ideal situation, but the ideal situation for your team. And that's probably been the most interesting thing about Syakum this season, is that he's taken a role that isn't ideal for his play style, and he started to thrive within it, because there's a year now, well, actually much longer than a year, between the last time he was selected, the last season where he was selected for All-NBA, and his game looks significantly different in the places he's getting on the floor, how much of it is dependent on his own creation, and, the teammates around him. Like the Raptors went from being Morey ball to now they are almost the inverse of it. The Raptors, as far as the type of live dribble shots they took, where they took shots from on the floor, led by Kyle Lowry, 3-pointers and layups. And with a burgeoning 3-pointer game, Pascal, and obviously layups getting to the rim, that fits so well. But now the Raptors slow the game down so much, they don't get that many easy baskets. And if they do, typically Pascal's the guy passing people into those. And so he is surviving on a diet of only difficult baskets. And he's basically giving you, I think he's approaching 57% true shooting, that's absurd for the type of shots he's forced to take all the time, and the attention. You framed the conversation in your piece around like spacing and the type of shooting that surrounds him. And there are some proprietary stats that will go into boiling down those stats into kind of like a number. How much spacing does a person usually work with? How much gravity do they have themselves? And Pascal works with hardly any spacing and has an immense amount of gravity himself. So he is the straw that stirs the drink for the Raptors. And he's doing so in a way that's completely alien, because, he's being forced into positions that have never been his go-to at the NBA level. and he's
Yeah.
still succeeding. So even outside of just trying to get that all NBA spot, and the case you make for beating Butler at his own game, being better than Butler from mid-range is such an easy way to frame the conversation, because that is Butler's whole thing, is the mid-range playmaking, and Pascal even, emulating some value close to that really makes it a huge win for him. In addition to however many minutes he's played, way more. And because he hasn't missed a game since December 28th, and he's played almost 200 more minutes than second place in that span. It's just this season for him, starting out slow and not even in a way that was his fault, having the trade rumors in the offseason, having some of the fan base say that, because the Raptors had a 5-game winning streak against like Indiana and Washington early on the season, that the team was better without him. Just such a strange Twilight Zone type of place to exist and live for Pascal Syakum. And it's a good thing he doesn't pay much attention to the media and, what fans say. But to come out of it progressing as a player at this rate, I don't even think it's, there's an exciting conversation to say he'll be all NBA. But even past that is to say the progression that everybody thought was kind of capped is not even close to being so.
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes back to the other part of my piece, where I think ever since 2020 March, we've let what's amounted to about 71 games ish, sort of dictate the narrative on Pascal Siakam. And I think when you weigh the body of work, when you see the ascension of Pascal Siakam up to that point, I think that was really unfair. I think, appreciating the nuance of, hey, this was a guy who got stuck in his condo, tried to get out, tried to get a visa to the United States and couldn't, and wanted to do everything within his control to play basketball and be ready. Didn't have those things. And I think that largely contributed to the struggles that we saw in the bubble. And then I think a lot of the team failures were attributed to him in Tampa as well, where there was individual growth with the playmaking, but if it wasn't translating to wins, those clutch moments where the ball's going in and out on those finishes around the basket, those create these visceral memories where you're thinking, oh, this guy is just not the same guy anymore. And I think now with the return to normalcy, we get to see that he's actually even better.
Much better. Yeah. As you said, it was slow growth, but it was, most people want results before they recognize growth. It's why, Chris Boucher basically won his minutes over a 2-month stretch by 200 points. And it was only towards the back end of February that anybody started saying, oh, he's a good bench player now, even though it was true as early as, the middle of December. He had started to turn the corner. And it's people just need a little bit more than what's actually happening on the court. They need it to happen on the court. They need it to connect to wins and then or big time statistics. And then they need people to talk about it. And Zach Lowe putting the Boucher and Precious Achua thing in his 10 things was good. People finally starting to talk about Pascal Siakam as an all NBA guy again, instead of, guys like Bill Simmons saying, is this the worst contract in the NBA? I wouldn't trade, Al Horford for this guy. These weird conversations that were being had finally return to normalcy and get him in a place where he's getting the respect he deserves. So pretty cool. It's nice to see a guy reclaim not even form, but just reputation the league over.
It's beautiful. It's great. It's great to see. And I think the other thing that, people like you, Lewis, Blake, myself, were all mindful of as well was that once Kawhi left, there was going to be a lot of information gathering for him before he could actually legitimately do something with it, or do something that looked extremely efficient and super productive with it. And now we're seeing that.
Well, yeah, that's basically the thing. And for the things I'm about to say, this is no shade at OG Anunoby whatsoever. I talk about him with too much nuance to have this taken and run with, but OG, how he's trying to make that step into stardom and the, start-stop aspect to it, where he's making, he's progressing in this way, but he's now regressing in another, and it's a constant exchange of like improvement and regression, improvement and regression. That's how difficult it is to become a star. OG is trying and might not make it. Pascal just made it. Like, he just did it. He made the jump after being the 27th pick in the draft, after starting basketball late. He kind of just did it. And then the NBA adjusted his pull-up three-point shot. He was making like 15% less of them, and he had to readjust his whole game again to a new team context, all this kind of stuff, and he's still making that jump. Yasmin Duola, 3 years ago maybe coined him as a kinetic savant, in that there's just a lot of things he can do physically, and he's so capable of emulating things he wants to see done on the court, working to get the muscle memory in, and then just exacting it. Like, we talked about the sidestepping Kyle Lowry on a charge, at game speed, with how good we know Kyle Lowry is at taking charges. That is no simple feat. That is an extremely adaptive physical procedure to undergo. It's just, you got to do a lot of things to get into a space where you can hit a shot after doing that. And he's just a guy who gets into spaces, reacts to stimuli, and makes stuff move, makes stuff happen. And yeah, it's been a really cool thing.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. I think you've hit on everything that we needed to talk about with Pascal there.
Which is a good thing, because we're about to get into something else, but not until we get this message in from our friends over at Jack Health. Want to get to the top of your game? Jack Health at www.jack.health is an online service for men's health that handles the doctor's appointment, the prescription, and the shipping, which, by the way, is free. All you need to do is stay at home and relax. They've got stuff for sexual health, daily health, hair and skin, you name it. Order what you want, fill out some questions, and get it stripped straight to you. Skip having to lay out all your medical issues in the clinic waiting room, and keep your private business private. Free shipping and easy prescriptions. Boost your game and do it all from the privacy of your own home at www.jack.health. Okay, now that we're covered with all of our health, Vivek, we have to talk about Scottie Barnes and the status of his Rookie of the Year situation. I put out a video for Yahoo Sports kind of detailing, somebody dubbed it, some sort of hipster basketball takes, exactly what I needed. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was, better than that. But I tell you this much, it's there. What's your case for Scottie as the Rookie of the Year?
My case for Scottie as Rookie of the Year is the offensive repertoire being significantly ahead of Evan Mobley's. I think when you look at his capabilities, no one thought, someone called him a zero level scorer. And that kind of set the expectations, where even myself, based on the little that I had seen, was thinking, okay, he might need some time coming off the bench. He's probably not going to average, double digits in scoring this year. And we'll see what he can offer defensively, because that's where a lot of the reputation seems to be coming from. And then the season starts out and he is miles ahead offensively than defensively. And you look at him working around the edges of the paint, him having, that post and hook, him having the mid-range where he's able to just rise up pretty comfortably. The shot looks pretty clean from the mid-range. Obviously, there's a long way to go with the three-point shot. But, you've talked about his ability to kind of freelance around those areas and create space using his body in different ways. And I think he's really impressed with that aspect of it. Mobley's edge is obviously on the defensive end. But I would say that the gap between Scottie and Mobley offensively outweighs what the gap between Mobley and Scottie is defensively now. I don't think that was the case for the first few months of the season. But I think Scottie, beyond, maybe when he gets switched on to a guard and gets blown by, has come quite a long way defensively as well.
Well, that's the interesting part, is that Scottie, for the first time, Raptors player is probably benefiting from, like, let's say, the media not being as familiar with their game, because there are a lot of people who heard that Scottie was a really good defender and kind of just they'll see one of his highlight plays and then slump into the feeling of, oh yeah, Scottie Barnes, is as advertised. That's a good defender. And now that, like, if you go by like EPM or some catch-alls, and even just on off, the Raptors defense is now, officially better with him on the floor. And because of, as you said, he's closing the gap to Mobley especially over the last like month and a half. But the first, however, many months of the season, oftentimes he was the worst defender on the floor. And that doesn't mean he's a tragedy. The Raptors had good defenders on the floor. It just means, like, he has astronaut tendencies. He wanders out. He floats out. He pushes way too high on guards that he doesn't have the foot speed to contend with, and still does, obviously. Like, losing, there's a reason Thad Young had a better time guarding Marcus Smart than Scottie Barnes did. It's because Thad was like, Marcus Smart is 2 for 11 from 3. We'll let him hang out. And Scottie is like, I need to rip this dude with, extreme ball pressure defense. The same way that Marcus Smart beat Gary Trent off the bounce and beat Scottie off the bounce, but could not, outfox Thad, which is, I think, an incredible comment on how, like, guile and smarts can get you by on defense. But anyway, I'm kind of going on a tangent. Scottie.
No, I like this tangent.
Scottie was bad and Mobley was definitively good, albeit in an easier role where he knew exactly what he was doing game to game. And Scottie's was a lot different. Like as you talked about, the Raptors were trying to figure things out when Kawhi left, and that impacted Syakum. Now the Raptors defensively are trying to figure things out after Kyle left, and that's affecting everybody, but also Scottie. Like, it's all about data. They're trying to figure out, what works, what type of things can we throw at other teams, these schemes. And, Scottie is in the middle of that. And sometimes he's the head of the snake in this regard. So he's had a harder job on both ends of the floor, but Mobley has just outpaced him. But as you said, offensively, Scottie, and this is also, like, if people pay attention to the context, what is Scottie's job in a regular game, and what is Mobley's job in a regular game? Mobley may be asked to freestyle on 1 or 2 possessions, but most of the time he's going to be receiving, if he's making a basket, it is assisted. And Darius Garland is one of the best pick and roll engines in the NBA. He's still, his reputation is lagging a little bit behind. He's in Cleveland, but that guy makes, like, reads out of the pick and roll at a top 5 rate in the NBA. He just creates so many looks for his teammates, and Mobley's on the other side of that. And Scottie is a guy who they're saying, go see if there's a small guy or, even a white guy on the other side of the court and just abuse him. And that is such a difficult ask to do in the NBA. There's a reason why we see gifted guys come out of college with handles, with a first step, with a shot. And, maybe they have 2 of the 3, but they can't figure out how to score at the NBA level ever. And Scottie, in his own unique way that he approaches isolations, the offensive glass, even just like the quick flashes into post-ups and stuff like that, he has a very unique brand of scoring the basketball, and he translated it immediately. And in a way better way than he even accomplished at college. Like, he was as likely to score in single digits, at the collegiate level as he was in double digits. And now he's averaging close to, 16 points per game at the NBA level. This is a guy who's being asked to create so often against defense that aren't loaded up like they are on Cade, but against other NBA defenders. There is no advantage given to him. It isn't like Mobley catching the lob. It isn't like Mobley on the roll, or these quick little flashes into 4-foot post-ups over a guard. It's a guy getting the ball at the 45 extended and being told, like, go get us a bucket. The floor is bent in your favor, and let's see what you can do. they're doubling Pascal, they're doubling Fred. Now make it work in isolation. And he does. And as you said, for a guy being called a 0-level scorer, that's kind of insane.
I think this is the biggest point to note is he is someone who by nature is extremely unselfish. And I think all those early season conversations where Nick Nurse is telling the media, no, I want him to be more aggressive. I want him to take more shots. He's not shooting enough. He's not doing this enough. He needs to, recognize his opportunities more. And it was all to get him to this point that we've seen since the All-Star break, where every time he has a mismatch, he's going right at it. And sometimes, hey, even if it's someone that's right at, who can stick with him physically, he's going right at them too. And to make that transition mentally, I think of Steve Nash and how unselfish he was. And yet he was someone who was the best shooter on his team. And, once he went to the Warriors, he's talked about, I look back and I feel like I look at Steph Curry and I say, yeah, I should have been shooting more. We should have been pushing the pace even more, and this sort of balance that unselfish players try to find between getting the best out of their teammates versus getting the best out of themselves. Guess what? Sometimes if the opportunity for you to score is greatest, you have to recognize that over anything that might happen for your teammates. And I think that's the transition that Scottie has made since the All-Star break. And hopefully that is something that will remain consistent going forward.
It's the expose him doctrine, right? That the Raptors partake in. Like the ball ends up in OG's hands, Pascal's hands, Scottie's hands. And it's, everybody yells at the same time, like, expose him. This is a team that doesn't run pick and roll. This is a team that wants mismatches, and then they'll let Fred run his pick and roll offense, but the big guys are going to work in a different way. And Scottie's ability to help them tilt the floor by leveraging his own scoring ability is, as you said, it shouldn't be taken for granted. This is a unique thing. Most players can't do this. And it does speak to, Scottie, his ability to input things at game speed and obviously in between games, because after Nick Nurse openly commented about Scottie not shooting enough threes, then we get roughly a month of basketball where Scottie is shooting, like 5 threes a game and hitting 40%. That obviously didn't stick, but it's just like, this is a guy who will hear things, be told things, and will immediately start trying to do them on the court. A lot of players are risk averse in the NBA. They like to play in their own comfort zone, and Scottie is so willing to leave his. And that's what fuels breakouts. That's, you have to go beyond what teams are expecting of you because they game plan around that. And Scottie will have adjustments into the future that certainly are going to be difficult. We've seen it some this year, the way that, in some nights, in some possessions, teams load up on Scottie the same way they would on Pascal. Pack line defense, fill in the gaps, make it so that you're not dealing with your primary anymore. You're dealing with the second level of defense. Pascal said he doesn't even look at his primary anymore. He's just focusing on, 3 seconds in the key. Where's the rotation been coming from all game? Is that where my pass is? And then if the rotation comes, then I start worrying about that too. But Scottie is a guy who works in isolation and now has to figure out the second level of defense, which he will. He's a brilliant young player, but it's just really tough to make these changes live. And some rookies do. And those rookies tend to be super, super successful. And I think he's in that boat. He looks to me like he is headed for a rookie contract all-star game, which radically changes how the Raptors are building a team, I think.
I think I'm with you there. All-star is definitely on the cards. I've said before that I think by the end of his rookie contract, that final season, he could potentially make an all-NBA team. I think he's that special. And you look at the team ethos, that's what's going to bring it out. The fact that they will swing for the fences with their players. And we've seen Pascal elevate his game to this level. We've seen Scottie do the things that he's done over the course of the season and gradually improve. You look at Precious Achua, right? They don't mind.
Hell yeah.
going through the growing pains, because they look at what the ceiling can be, and for them, it's worth it to swing for that. And heck, I'll go to even Justin Champagny in the G League now, taking 10 threes a game.
Mhm.
Like, that is going to get him to a level that can potentially make him a meaningful part of the roster with the big club. And
Champagny's going to be there. Like he's it's so easy to tell with him.
Yeah. But these are the things, right? Like, you have to be willing to take those struggles. You go back to Pascal that season with the bench mob, where he's missed 25 3-pointers in a row, and everyone's saying, why is this guy shooting threes? And the organization is saying, hey, you are not going to get better at them only taking them in practice. You have to be willing to expose yourself. You have to be willing to take everything that comes with it. And then, once you build up that aptitude, both mentally and physically, that this is just a part of your game, that's when the results will start to come.
Yeah. I wonder if there's ever been like a thesis paper written on the value of a regular rep versus game rep. And like that I feel like that's impossible to figure out, but to put a number on, you just say like, oh yeah, the game rep is more important. And then an essentialist could be like, well, actually it's the exact same for the body. But then how does the body connect to the mind? Like what happens in the brain ends up in the fingers, something like that. But yeah, you talked about Precious Achiuwa, and I think that leads us into the next conversation, which is the back end of the Raptors rotation, which for a long time was A, uncertain, and then B, non-existent, and then C, where it is now, where the Raptors are in a super, super funky place where if they're healthy, they don't have a bench rotation. They have a big rotation. Precious Achiuwa, Chris Boucher, Thaddeus Young lead off the bench. It is very unique. It is something unto the Raptors. What do you think about how that lines up heading into the end of the season and the playoffs?
I've been thinking a lot about this and just comparing it to different teams that play tight rotations in the playoffs. And I think ultimately, a lot of people subscribe to the idea that depth doesn't matter as much in the postseason because you play these tight rotations. And for me, I kind of look at it differently, where I say the depth matters because it gives you different options for that tight rotation in the postseason. There's a series where Thad Young might look better on the court than Chris Boucher. There's a series where it'll be the opposite. There'll be another series where, who knows, there might be, a bit of a place for Armani Brooks, and we'll see how those things plays out. But I think that's how I view it more, where, especially with a coach like Nick Nurse, who likes to do different things and throw different things at opponents, I think having different types of depth contribute to the rotations that you can play in any given series and then give you the best chance to win.
Mm-hmm. And Kem Birch, how does he fit in there for you?
I think it's been a tough season for Kem. I think when you look at just the ups and downs throughout the year, not being able to start out the season, which is pretty much the starting point of Precious getting his opportunities. Funny how that works out. But I think he's someone that can contribute. I don't want to say a pinch, that's probably too light, but I think there's very specific scenarios where you would use him. Obviously, you can think of, a Boston series, even without Robert Williams. I think there's matchups there with Daniel Theis, Al Horford, where he would fit in. Obviously, he didn't have a good go of it against Miami last night. That wasn't very effective. So I think there's certain scenarios where he can help. That short roll game can be important with Fred VanVleet, but if he's not able to consistently make that little floater that he likes to go to, if he's not able to make the reads quick enough, then that's where, unless a Precious or a Boucher or that are really struggling, it's hard to see him getting too many opportunities down the stretch.
This is kind of where I've been at with it too, is you look at, well, he hasn't scored in 3 games, by the way. And that's like I don't know. It's not that many minutes. It's like 20 minutes of game time, but still, you're waiting for a guy, as you said, like that short roll game. You run actions on offense to dictate a response from the defense and hopefully to compromise their defensive position. And with Kem not threatening from the middle of the floor, the short roll passing, which is definitely better than average for the center position, but it's also short roll passing that basically only extends to the outside of the court. He does not play make middle. He play makes middle out. And if the team facing them, like, Boston, or, well, he didn't play against Boston, but Minnesota when they played Orlando and Miami, if these teams aren't willing to rotate over to him and are just going to leave like, okay, shoot over our big who's in drop, he's just not, those are just 0 possessions for the Raptors. Like, that's just time off the shot clock, and it creates a reset. And, we've seen, it happened last night too, is like, he takes that corner 3 and you wonder, wow, how would that possession look if it was Boucher or Precious or even Thad, all these different opportunities that could come about. And that's where you wonder, is it too easy to adjust for Kem? He plays pretty mistake-free, but there's just no punch. And you kind of have to, they'll decide obviously what that looks like in the playoffs and, the finishing touch on the season, but we'll see. And that's where, Precious Achiuwa, I think, comes into it, where he is definitely not mistake-free, but he gives you a very, very good baseline defensively just because his talent for changing shots at the rim. And, as we saw, especially in the first half against Miami, really rapid low man rotations to kind of move guys further along to make them cycle the ball away from a shot at the bucket. He also gives you a lot of, maybe not randomness, but versatility offensively in what he's able to provide. And I'm curious what you think about his offensive game currently, and feel free to comment on his defense as well. But his offensive game in the light of, is the off the dribble stuff good in a playoff game, or is it only palatable currently because he's also making just a huge amount of threes?
I think that threes are crucial to anything else he tries to do. That confidence he has, letting it rip, is incredible to see. But I think you hit the nail on the head there when you spoke about Kem and, needing that punch. And I think Precious, that 3 ball is what gives him that punch, right? And those attack opportunities that come on poor closeouts or, falling for a pump fake, whatever it might be. I think that's where the rest of his game can evolve. And obviously there's a long way to go with his finishing around the basket. But if that 3 ball, which no one would have suspected, becomes what gives him that punch, I think that's where in the playoffs that those dribble opportunities will come, because at a certain point you're just going to have to respect it.
It seems to me that, I'm like, it's a foregone conclusion that in the first round, Precious is going to give you 20 plus points in one game. Like, he's going to hit 3 threes. He's going to attack closeouts. And that's another thing too, right? Is against the Celtics, when the Raptors in that playoff series went small, OG being the screener, getting the ball on the roll and making these progressive reads against the moving defense, or being able to go all the way to the rim, was a huge deal. And Precious, as we saw in that game against, especially like Philly, getting a closeout from a guy like Tyrese Maxey, giving that little pump and then that slick drop dribble into the lane, getting to like 8 feet and hitting a floater, that is pretty rare. Not for a guy his size. A lot of 6'9" guys do it, but a lot of guys who are 6'9" who can also defend the rim on the other end, who also are extremely heavily correlated with rebounding more of their defensive possessions, and a guy who will also grab you bunch of extra possessions on the offensive glass. There's just a really unique mix of skills going on with Precious. And if they hit all at the right time, that's when, like, if Precious plays a really good series, the Raptors have a chance to beat, I don't know about anybody in the first round, but they have a chance to beat a lot of teams in the first round because good Precious is like, just it tips the scale so far one way because you don't have to live with like what the Raptors are doing at the start of the season, which was, oh yeah, the offense is significantly better with Kim on the floor because he just makes simple reads and Precious doesn't know how to move yet. And then the defense was significantly better with Precious and you had to choose, okay, are we going offense or defense? He allows you to just choose both. And I find that fascinating to see if that'll be the outcome, you know?
Yeah, I think a good Precious in a series, you look at, okay, maybe you'd say even with good Precious, the Bucks will come out of that, but it'll be a competitive series. Good Precious going up against the Miami Heat, I think, you probably swing towards Miami in 6 or 7. But I think good Precious against Boston now without Robert Williams would be really interesting to see. You look at them against Philadelphia, I think that's where Precious could be a huge swing, right? When you look at how that matchup played out when the Raptors went and beat them on the road and how important Precious was in that game, that's something that you see if he's good, 5 out of, say, 7 games in that series, you might come out of that series.
Mm-hmm. Well, he blows my mind, dude. Taking like even you look at the big moments defensively that aren't just the passive defensive rebounding and rim protection that he brings, but the standout games where he was picking up Giannis 3/4 court for the second half of that win in January. He guarded Embiid as like the primary defender for much of their win against the 76ers, but he closed out the game guarding James Harden. And he also has like standout performances against Luka Doncic. And he's a very unique defender. In a playoff series, I struggle to even think of all the different situations they'll try and use him in because even when they played the Lakers, LeBron did not take anything but a fadeaway on Precious Achiuwa. Like between Harden, Embiid, LeBron, Giannis, these are just all 30, like not Harden anymore, but these are just 30 point per game scorers that are radically changed off of their offensive game plan because of Precious Achiuwa. I mean, the Hawks stopped running pick and roll because Precious was the big defender. They started running isolations for Trey so he wouldn't be involved in actions anymore. That blows my mind, dude. It's crazy to me.
No, his ceiling defensively is as high as anyone's. I think in some ways, and you can tell me if you disagree, he's like a bigger, stronger version of Mikal Bridges, if that makes sense. Where I think he can just cover all these gaps. He can stick with you in single coverage. And then, because of his length, when he's vertically contesting, it's very difficult to score.
That's an interesting comp. Some of the fluidity, tracking around screens and even on the offensive end, like the 2 dribble pull up or 1 dribble pull up, I see some fluidity there, but he's just way stronger too, right?
Yeah.
Like these guys who rely on strength creation, like LeBron, Giannis, Luka, even Jimmy, right? These guys who try and get into Precious's body and are shocked at how little he moves in these defensive possessions. That's where a lot of the value lies. But yeah, the fluidity to track guys across the court, I can see a Mikal comp there as well. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Not one I would have thought of.
Yeah, I mean, I think, realistically, Precious, like, offensively, there are guys who are 1 of 1, and I think we might, this goes back to the conversation before where we need to see it on a larger scale to be able to say these types of things, but he is very
Mm-hmm.
much a one-of-one defender, right? And if he can maintain this trajectory that he's shown, then I think we'll be having that conversation if he has a decisive impact in a playoff series or, into next season.
Mm-hmm. And just, like I wrote about it. You probably saw me comment about it on Twitter, but like the Raptors running some of their favorite Horns actions with him as the trigger man and him succeeding in the decision making is pretty meaningful because some of their Horn sets, they don't run unless they have like 2 out of 3 of Scottie, Pascal, or OG on the floor, but Precious plugged in as one of those guys, and they actually succeeded in it. That's a very unique thing, and it was against Orlando, but Orlando's also, like, at that point, they were the 4th best defense since the All-Star break. Like, they're a young team, and they guard good really well for these stretches, and then it drops off a cliff, but Precious is making things happen as a guy making reads, so, yeah, really interesting. Before we get out of here, though, let's do wins and losses predictions for the last 4 games of the season, which is Atlanta, Philly, Houston, and then the Knicks. I'll go first with what I think will happen, and then feel free to tell me where I might be wrong. So Atlanta, I'm predicting a win. Philly, I'm predicting a loss. And then Houston and New York, I'm predicting wins.
Very interesting. I am going to go with wins across the board.
4-0.
4-0 to finish out. I think the only reason there might be a loss in the Knicks game is if it's entirely meaningless and they just go the rest route. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to add a caveat to the Philly game. If OG plays that game, it's a win. If he doesn't, it's a loss.
Okay.
And I think that's an interesting conversation that the Raptors have to have here on out, because once you play that game on the 10th, at this point, I would like to presume that they're not going to be in the play-in tournament. So you're looking at nearly 6 days off, or precisely 6 days off. And how do you view, just resting OG with whatever is going on with his hip? And so do you just let him take, almost 2 weeks off here? Or do you try to maintain that rest versus rust equation and have him out there a little bit?
Yeah, that's interesting. I was just assuming that he'd be back, but yeah, that's a good one. He also kind of changes how Atlanta wants to attack the Raptors defensively as well.
Yes.
Obviously, when the Raptors beat, because they've only beaten Trae Young once this year. The other games that they won didn't have Trae, and then they obviously lost the last time. But OG radically changes how they're able to attack. So yeah, that's interesting if he's back for that one too. I won't add any caveats, but your caveat makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I like that. But 4-0 is really that's optimistic. We love optimism. That's good.
I mean, they've kind of swung my perception of them, right? As opposed to coming into the season thinking they'd be around a 500 team, they'd for sure be in the play-in tournament. I think the team we've seen since December 31st is just drastically different. And I do think that, as with most Raptors teams, they're not getting the respect that they deserve, partially because they're extremely young. And so it's hard to anticipate these things, right? And there's that prove 'em mentality where, okay, well, they haven't done it in the playoffs yet. Are they this good yet? But you look back, since December 31st, I believe the Raptors are 32-16, and the Miami Heat are also 32-16, or they're virtually identical. And so you look at the way one team is perceived versus the other. You look at the big wins that the Raptors have had over extremely good opponents. You kind of wonder, hey, why aren't they part of bigger conversations?
Yeah, they're, I guess, what are they, 25-17 now versus the Like was it? I can't
Like
remember.
plus 500 teams, you mean?
Yeah. Something like that.
So on the season now versus teams 500 and above, they are 24 and 22.
What's
per ESPN?
I'm trying to find. It was like versus top 4 teams in the conference or something like that. Do you remember a stat like that floating around?
Yeah, that was extremely high for the Raptors, right?
Yeah, I thought they were 24 and 17, and then they beat Philly, but they've lost a couple. So yeah, something around there.
Right. Well, I mean, if it was just the top 4 teams, it wouldn't be that many games, right? It'd be a lot less than that.
What kind of stats am I looking at, dude? I'm in the deep end over here.
So ESPN has, like, if you just go to the expanded version of their standings.
Yeah. Walk me through it.
So yeah, are you at the NBA standings page?
No, you're giving me a tour.
Okay. Yeah. So when you go to the NBA standings page, usually you're just at the regular stuff that you see, home, road, all of that. But then there's a tab right beside the standings that says expanded. And so when you click there, that's when you can see the record versus teams that are 500 or better. And so that's where the Raptors are 24 and 22. And so that's the other thing too, is like this can change over time, where if depending on, there's a team that's sort of flirting with that 500 mark. And, you know, Atlanta, for example, is a team that for a long time this season was below 500, and the Raptors having a losing record against them didn't matter. And then now they go above 500 and it does, right? So.
Oh, that's totally what it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So little things like that can make a difference.
I got you. You've put my mind at ease. Now the statistics that I was citing, albeit still wrong, I can see where I erred. Thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Happy to help.
Yes, very helpful. Before we get out of here, is there any parting shots you want to give to the listeners?
No, just you can check out my work as usual at Raptors.com, at CBC Sports. You can follow me on Twitter at Vivek Jacob. And besides that, Samson, thank you for having me on. Always enjoy these basketball chats with you, and the personal chats we have before we start the recording. I wish you the best coming down the stretch here. Hopefully it'll be a fun time for all of us. Thanks, man. That's kind of what I try and be, a cool guy, so I can pull better guests than usual. You know, like they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to go talk on this podcast, but also the appeal of, chatting with Sam, just, besides that, I'm trying to be that guy so I can, there's always those like journalists who have that extra cachet because they're just cool as hell. I'm trying to be that guy, Okay. You might need some tutoring sessions with Alex Wong if that's the case. He's got the cachet. He's probably at the top of the food chain when it comes to that. Oh, cool guy, Alex. I got to say, yeah, I did feel that. We did a podcast in February, and yeah, got major cool guy vibes from him, which I hadn't talked to him. Well, actually, you were there when I got to meet him for the first time, actually. Yeah, cool guy, Alex. Big shout out for our guy, Alex, on the show. But yeah, Vivek, thank you so much for coming on, man. Thanks so much for having me, Samson. Always a blast. It was a real pleasure. Okay, listener, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.